On Friday, China published its position on the political settlement of the Ukraine conflict, laying out 12 points on how to resolve the crisis. Meanwhile, media in the West have just started to hype up on a story by the German news magazine Der Spiegel that claims China is about to provide military support to Russia, including dual-use equipment. On that basis, Washington has warned Beijing not to do so or face serious consequences. Can such reports be substantiated? Is there a media campaign to use the war in Ukraine to implicate China? 1 year on, is the end of war in sight at all? What is helpful and what is not? I'm pleased to be joined from Hong Kong by Professor Wang Jiangyu of the School of Law at the City University of Hong Kong, and from Cambridge, Massachusetts, the United States, by Klaus Larres, Professor of History and International Affairs at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He's also visiting scholar at the Center of European Studies at Harvard University. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So very briefly on China's position on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. The 12 points include the respecting of sovereignty of all countries, abandoning Cold War mentality, ceasing all hostilities, resuming peace talks, resolving the humanitarian crisis, protecting civilian and prisoners of war, keeping nuclear power plants safe, reducing strategic risks, facilitating grain exports, stopping unilateral sanctions, keeping industrial and supply chains stable, and promoting post-conflict reconstruction. I want to go to Professor Wang first for the significance of this paper at this critical juncture, basically just hours ago.
Thanks for having me, Liu Xin. Nice to be here again. The position paper was just issued an hour ago, and I was reading it with great interest. It is basically a collection of some of China's rather consistent position on this issue from the very beginning. But it also has, if you read between the lines, it also has some very interesting, probably new points, new position revealed in the official way. So with respect to Chinese position, I would urge people to distinguish between two questions. The first one is whether China supports Russia's war on Ukraine. And the second question is whether China wants to maintain a good, friendly, and cooperative relationship with Russia. So these are two very different questions. So China and Russia are two neighbors. So it will be each other's biggest nightmare, disaster, if China and Russia become enemies. So both countries, I guess especially China, wants to have very good neighborhood relationship with Russia. But this does not necessarily mean that China would support the war. So the Chinese position, at least the official position, has always been that China wants peace, and China wants the respect for state sovereignty and territorial integrity, and China wants international dispute to be resolved in a peaceful way.
Yes.
And China is also against the use of nuclear weapon, and China does not want to see the disruption of supply chains, including wheat export.
Yeah.
So those positions are all made quite clear in that position paper.
Professor Larres, how do you look at the propositions by China at this moment? For instance, the call for all sides to cede hostilities. China is not saying only one side has to lay down the arms, but all sides, and calling for peace negotiations to start, and of course, to prevent nuclear power plants from being damaged and prevent nuclear weapons from being used. How do you look at China's voices at this very important time mark, especially amid the accusation that China is about to supply weapons to Russia with no substantive evidence, no public evidence, and that even some so-called dual-use equipment are being included in the list. Again, there's no evidence at all disclosed.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And regarding these are accusations from American intelligence. They apparently have evidence to show that, but we don't know, of course. So we really don't know whether or not China wants to get more militarily involved in the war. Hopefully, of course, not. Regarding the points China has just tabled, the 12 points, which I've only just seen, they are all very good points. They're very sensible, very common sense points. And I think everyone would like to have nuclear power plants protected. Everyone wants to have an end of the war, clearly. The problem is, of course, how to get there. And China is probably the one country in the world which has an awful lot of influence on Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And I think that influence needs to be used. So if China can pressure Putin into laying down arms, into making some concessions so that peace talks are possible, then I think China would be praised by almost everyone in the world, because everyone wants to see an end of the war. But of course, it is difficult to accept that the aggressor, Russia, would maintain the territory they have conquered. Should we reward the aggressor?
So 2 points basically you're making. First of all, China's influence over Russia. You are saying China has that influence. Secondly, that the West really wants to see a quick solution to the crisis. I mean, I'm talking about the United States, maybe not necessarily Europeans who may want to prolong this conflict. Professor Wang, what are your reactions on these 2 points?
First, very quickly on the allegations that China is going to provide military assistance to Russia. Of course, I don't have the intelligence. I don't know whether that's true or not. As a fact, but I think from the common sense perspective, it's entirely unlikely, because China does not gain anything from militarily involved. So China has been valued as a third party, as a neutral party. I don't think China wants to lose its neutrality in this regard. So and then go back to your 2 points.
Yeah.
The same argument has been made about China North Korea relationship. So China has maintained a good relationship with a number of countries. Then some people, some politicians, especially Western politicians, want China to have the influence to do their job and to stop those countries. The question is, China has always been constrained. China has a long-term, consistent policy on non-interference based on the 5 principles. So even though China might be very close to a particular country, it's unlikely for China to ask that country to do something or stop doing something. Maybe in the future China might change, but so far the foreign policy or Chinese foreign policy orientations, China doesn't do that. So it can advise, it can develop a cooperative, mutually beneficial relationship, but it does not demand other countries to do things that belong to their own
Do you think,
business.
Professor Wang, do you think it is in the genuine interest of the United States that the war stops tomorrow?
Cynically speaking, no. I think there are, well, this is a war, so there are many casualties. It shouldn't be calculated from a cost-benefit perspective, but there are indeed some kind of geopolitical winners and losers. I think the 2 countries which are directly involved in the war, Russia and Ukraine, have been greatly weakened, and so has Europe. So Europe has been weakened. Europe has appeared to be an entity without much autonomy, and does not even have a security policy, cannot do much here. But the U.S. has benefited quite a lot. So U.S. is able to. I think the U.S. benefited in 2 respects. Number one, the U.S. has replaced Russia as the supplier of energy, of oil, at a higher price, and the U.S. can also export weapons to the countries. Tremendously increase. And secondly, the U.S. has Russia has made Europe more attached to it.
Okay,
Especially
Professor
to
Larres.
security policy.
Yeah, time is very limited.
Yeah,
Professor Larres, you can respond.
Yes, I would totally disagree with what Professor Wang has just said. You know, it is ludicrous to say that the United States or Europe were interested in prolonging the war and having more fighting done. The United States pays an awful lot of money in supporting Ukraine. Opinion in Congress is not as united as some media outlets report. So the Biden administration may have problems with continuing the war. They want to stop the war, as do the Europeans.
Do you have evidence? Do you have evidence to show that
Great.
the Biden administration is not interested in the war keeping going? Because that will keep Russia bleeding.
No one wants Russia to bleed. Everyone
but
wants to
the Biden administration
stop.
is joyous that Russia has been weakened.
No, not really.
They have said it in public.
What they don't want a weakening of Russia. They want to have the sovereignty of Ukraine maintained and observed.
Are you sure? Because
as China wants as well.
Are you sure? Because we had the Vice President of the United States celebrating the achievement so far of this war, or what has been, what has happened, and she said specifically that Russia has been weakened. This is one of the points that she touted.
Yes, but Russia has been weakened, so it cannot fight as thoroughly as it did at the beginning of the war against Ukraine. If Putin was to withdraw his troops tomorrow or today, everyone in the world, including the United States, would be jubilant.
Don't you think the United States is in a better position to make Russia do that?
How can you do that if Putin doesn't see reason? So you have to fight him, or you should try to talk to him.
How do you know? Because President Biden is not picking up the phone and talking to President Putin.
Well, it would be easy for Putin to actually phone President Biden. Why is it Biden who has to phone Putin?
No, because President Biden has said that he will not. He has no plan to. He has no immediate plan to contact President Putin. He has basically said we're not. Yeah.
But the guy who invaded a foreign country, Ukraine, who is the aggressor, shouldn't he also sue for peace? Shouldn't he take the initiative to stop what the carnage?
See, that's what China is calling for. That's what China is calling for. That all sides seek peace. That all sides cease hostilities. Right. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that is the right policy. Both sides should get round the table and talk to each other. But in the end, you cannot reward the aggressor with maintaining the territory it has conquered. I think this would not be fair.
We have to leave it there. But your point taken, and according to the latest poll by an influential European institution, the world is not siding with the West. People in the vast majority of countries in the world, or the population in the world, do not agree with the West. There is a question to be answered there. Many thanks, Professor Klaus Larres. I have to leave it there. 30 seconds to go. Professor Wang, next time we can continue discussion. Professor Wang Jiangyu from City University of Hong Kong. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.